Hey guys, and welcome back to ScarletSprites. So today's topic, what is your single greatest gaming achievement? I'm going to talk a little bit about that up next. So your single greatest gaming achievement. Now this could be anything, and I want you to go ahead and drop it in the comments down below while we're talking, but it could be picking up a game or a title that you have always wanted, and maybe there's a really great story where you got a fantastic deal on something. It could be beating a game or, 100% completing something that's really difficult. Maybe it's even an experience, attending a video game convention and just having a kick-ass weekend or day even. Could really be anything. I'm just looking to see what everyone's experiences have been and what people kind of intrinsically value. I'm really excited to kind of see that. I have a few, and I'll share those in a second, but kind of the origin of this whole video, it started with a guy that I knew in college, and not every vlog video I do is going to be about a guy I knew in college, I promise. But the guy's name was Mike. And it's a little confusing because of the game involved, which is Mike Tyson's Punchout. And Mike's claim to fame, he would always tell people, my single greatest gaming achievement, I can beat Mike Tyson anytime, any place. You turn that game on and I will whoop Mike's ass. And, we're college kids and we would fire up that Nintendo and say, Mike, beat Mike Tyson. And it would just, and granted, Mike wasn't always sober, and somehow I would say 90% of the time he found a way to beat that. There were times when Mike could barely walk. I'm just going to be honest with you. And we'd put that controller in his hand and he would do it sometimes. And we would just, and you could imagine the laughter, like just us like falling over because Mike he couldn't even stand up. And he's beating Mike Tyson. It was ridiculous. He was like the living embodiment, the nerd version of the Will Smith song,
I'm rough like a freight train, smooth like ice, and just straight up, I think I can beat Mike Tyson.
One time I asked him when we weren't drinking, I was like, what is the deal with that? Like, why is that such a big thing for you? And he talked about getting that game as a kid, really wanting it, and finally, I forget what the background was, but he, his mom gave it to him, and he just loved the game, and beating Mike Tyson and finishing off that title just gave him such a sense of fulfillment, and he dedicated time, patience, memorizing patterns, and he learned the game himself. And he was, he was a young kid like we all were back then, and he just said he always was chasing that same type of gratification of beating Mike Tyson. And he kind of became the guy, right? That I'm bigger than the game. I own this game, not just in a literal sense, in a figurative sense. And I don't know, he explained it a lot better than I am, but it was really cool listening to him talk about that. So that's kind of where I got the idea from all this, because of Mike. Mike would bring up his single greatest gaming achievement, and he would want to show it to you. So I have a single greatest gaming achievement that I like to talk about from time to time. There are two others that I'll talk about a little bit before we get into that, because the other two are ones that people always like to bring up, or they think are going to be what I would say is my top gaming achievement. The first is Virtua racing, and that's a good one. I mean, for anybody who has watched the channel, the heart, soul, blood, sweat, tears that I put into this thing. And that was a really cool pickup a few years ago. I mean, the thing cost me about $400. I got it from this lady on Facebook who had it listed as virtual racing, right? She rolls up at a little after 2 in the morning. Two guys hop out of the truck. She says, "This is my boyfriend, and this is my ex-boyfriend." I'm not asking questions. Thank you so much for bringing this, man. But I ended up getting that for $400, rats and all, those of you who've watched that video. And I did take this from a partially working Virtua racing all the way to a restored twin, and it works, and it has force feedback, put new T-molding on it, I painted it. I put a lot of hard work into this, and I just alluded to, I chiseled dead rats out of this cabinet. That's how dedicated I was to doing this. So I mean, that's a pretty good achievement, and I do feel pretty proud about that. And I did obviously have help from forums and reading, and you guys should all be doing that if you're working on these kinds of things. Don't try to go at it alone or be DMing people one-to-one and expecting to get, help desk service. Go out and read. I mean, that's how I learned all this stuff. So that's definitely one of my top memories. I really do value that. But it isn't number one. It's not my number one gaming achievement. The other one that always comes up, obviously, Neo Geo. I completed the Neo Geo MVS collection. I own every Neo Geo MVS card that was officially issued. There are some caveats with that, like, you got Xeno Crisis coming out with Bitmap Euro. I do own that. But some of the other cartridges that came out after the fact, like the NG Dev games, I don't own all of those. And, I just don't think of those as part of the original library from, back in the day. So I don't feel like I need to chase after those or even own them purely from a collecting standpoint. I just don't feel like I need those. But yeah, collecting the entire Neo Geo collection is, I guess, somewhat of an achievement. I don't know that there's any real skill involved in that. There's a hell of a lot of patience, going and scanning eBay and forums. I mean, eBay was a prime source for me back in the day because there just weren't a lot of people collecting MVS carts, and retro gaming really hadn't taken off at that point. And honestly, I wasn't doing anything with these MVS carts. Metal Slug was the first one I bought. I thought it was cool because it was in that black shell, right? And I just wanted it because it was Metal Slug and it was the real arcade version. To me, there was just something cooler about it being in that rugged shell and knowing that it had been in an arcade. I couldn't do anything with the cartridge at the time. I didn't have an MVS board or a cabinet, and I never really thought that I'd end up where I am today with that collection. But I don't know that it's necessarily, it's cool and I value it. I don't want to give that impression. I don't know. It's just not something that defines me, I guess, even though I like talking about Neo Geo and I like that collection and having it and being able to go through the library, and it means something to me. But there's not the intrinsic value in it. And I don't know if that's making sense, but that's just kind of how I feel. It's not my top achievement. All right, with those two accolades out of the way, are you ready for my number one gaming achievement? Back in the early 90s, I had a game called Battletoads for Nintendo. I worked very hard at mastering Battletoads and playing through that and practicing the Turbo Tunnel. You guys know all this stuff, right? It's things that are on Twitter and people talk about and joke about all the time. Battletoads is a tough game. I committed myself to that game. I finished that game in 1991. I took a picture of that end screen and I sent it to Nintendo Power. And in January of 1992, the Super Castlevania issue, I appear as a player who completed Battletoads in that magazine. My number one gaming achievement is having my name in Nintendo Power. Could never do that again. I could probably never beat Battletoads again, quite honestly, organically. I've tried a few times. I don't have it. I bet if I practiced a little bit, really committed myself to just playing Battletoads and wasn't tearing apart arcade machines all the time, I could probably maybe get myself back there. But yeah, this was an amazing thing to have arrive. Remember, I didn't know that this was happening. There was no letter that came in the mail that said, yeah, we got your submission and you're coming in here. So the magazine just arrived one day, and you know how excited you were when those magazines came, those new issues arrived in the mail, whether it was Nintendo Power or GamePro or EGM, and later I became a really big EGM fan. But for the time being in the early 90s, it was Nintendo Power, and you get that and you can't wait to tear into it. My joy when I'm looking through the new issue of Nintendo Power, all that new stuff that basically marketing for Nintendo to buy their products, and you flip to the page and there's your name, my name in Nintendo Power. I was overjoyed. I mean, I'm excited talking about it now, quite honestly. And I went into school the next day, and I mean, you guys might want to sit down because it might be shocking to learn that I wasn't necessarily the most popular kid in school, but for 1 week, I was a fucking legend in that school. Everybody was coming up to me saying, this is awesome. How did you do this? And I'm like, yeah, I was kind of like the younger version of Mike. Like, yeah, I can beat Battletoads, you know? It was really cool, and it was a cool thing to have in school it lasted about a week, and then it died out and nobody cared. But I cared, and, you know, I talked about it a lot in college. I told Mike that was my big thing, like Battletoads, and then he, of course, would always want to see me play Battletoads, and I think I did beat it a few times in college just in front of people, but Battletoads is a really big commitment, and you know, it's still a tough game even to this day. Like I said, I really can't pull it up and just finish it off. There is that warp in the turbo tunnels. I did not use that. I did not use that when I was a kid. I didn't know about it. So I truly did beat this game organically from start to finish. No Game Genie or any of that nonsense. No save states, obviously, back then. Just start to finish, practice and dedication, and you know, reap the benefits of having your name immortalized in Nintendo Power. And yeah, it's just something that you could never do today. Having your name in print in something like that came in the mail when you were a kid, I don't know, it just is really special. And it's my favorite thing to talk about, gaming related. When anyone asks me, like, what's your top achievement, what's your favorite thing about gaming, it's having my name in Nintendo Power. So I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with in the comments down below, what games you may have grabbed. Maybe it was a pickup on the cheap, maybe it was an experience somewhere you got to go to, something with a friend maybe. I mean, it could be anything. Just tell me what that #1 moment in gaming was for you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you all next time. Later, guys. But here's my boyfriend and here's my ex-boyfriend. Hey, whatever works for you.